Amazing. It's nice to get two familiar players here on the stream. So is Bryant a North American player?
I believe so. And interestingly enough, he is playing Amethyst Amber, a deck we haven't seen yet on stream today.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Amethyst decks, Amethyst Sapphire, Amethyst Steel, but yeah, first time we're seeing Amethyst Amber, and it should be a really interesting one.
Yeah, they're fairly, in my opinion, fairly similar in play styles where they want to go wide, but they also keep both opponents in check because they both have access to some sort of board wipe.
Yes, very true. And I think one of the strengths of Amethyst Amber is because it has so much card draw and it runs things like the Palace Guard. It can be quite good at holding down the dog's strategy, which is looking to go wide. But we play the Mowgli, so we'll be able to remove an action or a non-character card from Frank's hand. Frank doesn't have any, but it does give Brian that all-important information.
Or I think he did. I think just
Oh,
seeing
Under the
that
Sea, yes.
the Under the Sea, or was that removed from the, yeah.
Yeah, I think that may have been grabbed by the Mowgli. Bobby most likely putting the Lilo into the discard pile there. The stream struggling still down in Sao Paulo. Lots of amazing Lorcana action affecting the stability a little bit. But Frank
Right.
doing textbook dogs there, a one cost on one, Grandmother Willow another one cost on two, setting up some big future turns with either the Tramp Street Smart Dog or potentially even shifting in the Lady Miss Park Avenue, which was something we saw a lot in Zan Sayed's match when he was playing dogs earlier today.
Right. And we see Brian here inking the world's greatest criminal mind, playing the Cheshire Cat, now kind of keeping Frank here in check because he can move around damage. And as we've seen, Amber Emerald has very low willpower characters.
Yes. And very few ways, really, up until turn 5 with Elsa, for Brian to interact with Frank's board. So Frank can kind of use these early turns, set up the combo pieces needed to do something like the Under the Sea, just taking their time, really finding all of the little pieces they need for that, casting the Nanny here, and getting to look at the top 4 cards of the deck. And we're going to put a character 2 or less into the hand. And it looks like we're
And looks like we're
taking...
gonna pick the Lilo.
I'm gonna say Frank is one of my favorite Lorcana players. He was the very first DLC winner back in season 1, but has also won a DLC this season as well already, looking for his third DLC win. No one else has got 3 DLC wins yet, so is this Frank Carsten's time here in Sao Paulo?
Right? Is he gonna be a Disney Lorcana world record holder here?
So here we go. Let's see what Brian can do. A Genie. Risky business there if we do have Under the Sea, because Genie will be swept away, but gives Brian one additional card in their hand to rebuild afterwards if that is the case.
Right, and that Genie also synergizes with the Royal Guard there, adding some additional strength there. However, there's nothing exerted for that Royal Guard to challenge.
Okay, interesting. So we're going for a quest there with the Cheshire Cat, making it vulnerable potentially, because even if Frank doesn't have a way to deal with the board in that way, we do have something like the Tramp Enterprising Dog that you could play, buff up the strength of one of your smaller characters, and then remove the Cheshire Cat that way. But this is a matchup I'm not sure who is favored in a matchup like this.
Hey, personally, I don't think I've ever seen these two decks go against each other, so at least not often enough to confidently say like, oh, this deck is more favored over the other.
So very interesting there. Frank playing the Lilo from the discard, the cost reduced because of the Willow. But the main reason that you may want to do something like that is because it gives you another card deeper into your deck with the Tramp Street Smart Dog. So now we're going to look 6 cards deeper into the deck. We do have Singer 8 on board established, so it could help us deal with what Bryant is presenting, but it doesn't look like we managed to find the Under the Sea. Once again, we do see Della's Moon Lullaby, which would allow you to give a character -2 strength, but also draw a card. So that's something we could grab. Frank's just so organized with his cards. They do such a good job of spreading them all out there, and then also giving his opponent a good look at the 6 that he's going to be discarding.
Right, so neat, so organized. I absolutely adore it.
Interesting. So we're going to use Grandmother Willow to sing. Oftentimes these players won't be exerting their Grandmother Willows, but as a 2-cost singer, can use that to give the minus strength to the Cheshire Cat. I would imagine to the Cheshire Cat, so that we can challenge.
I would imagine it as well.
The nanny. Yep, there we go. So we give the Cheshire Cat the -2 strength, draw an additional card. Okay, and there we go. So there's the Tramp Enterprising Dog. So we can even play that now with the cost reduction thanks to the lady, and use one of our smaller characters, a Bobby, for instance, to then take out the Cheshire Cat. And actually, the other card that Frank has in their hand is the Emerald Chromacon. You've got to imagine that's a really good card in this matchup. I don't believe in Amethyst Amber there's really any way to interact with items. So once that's established, it's going to make challenging on Brian's side a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, Charlie, that Amber Amethyst just doesn't really have access to those tools to banish items. However, I'm curious to see if Bryant is playing items of their own as well. Not so much to counter the Amethyst or the Emerald Chromacon, but to play a Lantern or Junior Woodchuck's Guidebook to help just look for cards and bring characters out earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. The Lantern is certainly an item that these decks have been running. I think it almost got replaced by Grandmother Willow just because she is such an efficient way of doing a very similar effect. And of course, Grandmother Willows can reduce the cost of other Grandmother Willows versus a Lantern, which only cares about characters. So an item you won't be able to reduce the cost of. And Frank doing a lot of work on that turn, so removing the characters from Brian's side of the board, and then also going for a pretty hefty quest there as well.
Yeah, it's definitely jumping ahead on lore here. I imagine Brian here is just trying to think, what can I do in this situation, especially because they're a bit a ways away from playing a Raging Storm.
And Frank, deep in his thoughts there. Frank, for those who don't know, is a Magic the Gathering professional, is someone who is very interested on the statistics side of things, the probabilities of things, calculating what are the chances I need to get a specific card, I'm sure is what's running through his head right now. And we're going to see an Elsa. It's going to exert our Tramp, okay. So we can definitely clean up the board here a little bit. The Palace Guard is going to have 1 additional strength right now, so it's going to be a 2/2.
And yeah, choosing to remove the ladies off of Frank's board here. I'm sure Bryant at this point is prioritizing trying to challenge and remove as many characters as possible before Frank plays a Emerald Chromacon.
Yep. As soon as that comes down, things are about to get a lot more difficult for Bryant.
And very interesting to see. Like you said, we normally see Grandmother Willow stay, non-exerted because of her ability, but having her challenge puts her in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah, I wonder if Frank just kind of recognizing that she is vulnerable to the the Elsa that could, like, if there is another Elsa that comes down, and maybe just prioritizing the law a little bit. And I actually think it's quite a heads up play there using the Grandmother Willow to challenge, because you could have used something like the Tramp Enterprising Dog, but then now your opponent can finish them off. Whereas Grandmother Willow, if you are planning to just turn everything sideways anyway, is probably going to be the first thing that Brian looks to take out. So actually putting the 1 damage on there doesn't really affect you too much if she's going to be banished anyway. And it looked like Brian did have an Elsa in hand, so Frank maybe thinking ahead, being able to predict their opponent's hand, and also a Cheshire Cat, which can be quite tricky as well. But that Chromacon is really going to put Brian under a lot of pressure.
Right, because Frank possibly could have also prioritized questing with the Grandmother Willow, because there's a chance that if Brian challenges and banishes one of his other characters, he could bounce Grandmother Willow and play her again.
Very true. And this is a very difficult turn now for Brian. The Emerald Chromacon, you just see, you really have to not just think about what you're going to challenge, but think about what your opponent's going to bounce back, what you're going to have left on the board to do some additional challenging. So it really does put a lot of pressure. And not having anywhere to get rid of it in this matchup is just a very heads-up play there by Frank, looking for it with the Tramp most likely, and then being able to play it down now.
And it looks like we are going to play the Cheshire Cat and immediately boost it to move some damage around. And taking out the Tramp. Believe that is Tramp, a street smart dog.
Wow, so not only moving the damage, but then a double challenge into that Tramp. Just that's the most threatening thing on the board right now. And at least only one character is going to get sent back to Brian's hand here.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but it looks like Frank has no cards in hand?
Yes, so he had an Ursula in hand, but inked it on the previous turn. I don't think she's very useful in this matchup. I'm not sure Amethyst Amber is really running all too many songs. But Frank, just doing the maths here. I feel like I can almost see the numbers spinning around his head as he figures out what is the optimal play. What do I bounce back with the Emerald Chromacon?
And he's decided, and, because if he chooses Cheshire Cat, that means, that's an additional card for Bryant, but also GD bouncing back into hand means that if Bryant plays it right away, that's an additional card he could draw as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the synergy between the Lilos and the Emerald Chromacons are just absolutely amazing. One of the challenges with Lilo when she comes back from the discard is she does enter play Exerted, but now if your opponent is effectively punished for challenging that Exerted character, then it's less of a downside. And this is a very impressive looking board there from Frank, turning everything sideways. And once again, Brian has to do the maths, has to figure out what is the right play here to be able to deal with as much of Frank's board as I possibly can.
Right. And right away, Brian is choosing to boost the Cheshire Cat, moving 2 damage, but the question is to which Glimmer?
So we're going to put it on one of the Lilos. And now, Frank, it's one of the few times in Lorcana where you will have to make decisions on your opponent's turn. And here, Frank is thinking about what they're going to return to their opponent's hand. Do they give the card advantage with the Cheshire Cat? Do they put the Elsa back, knowing she can come and rush down right away? And it looks like we are going for the Elsa. So I think if I'm Brian right now, I'm going to do a challenge straight away to get rid of something. If Frank then wants to bounce my Cheshire Cat, then I'm going to draw some cards. But Frank may elect not to return the character in this instance.
It's a tough decision, because do you want to give Bryant more cards or remove that Glimmer? And then he ends up deciding to give Bryant the cards from Cheshire Cat's boost.
And one of those cards inked instantly. That's the Horseman Strikes. You can banish a chosen evasive character. Frank not going to have any or many evasive characters in their deck. And we are going to send the Elsa back. It's quite a tempo loss for Brian, paying 5 ink, removing a character, and then having nothing on the board to show for it. But we do have 2 Lilos now in the discard that we can bring back turn after turn. And Frank is going to quest with everything. And the problem for Brian now is every turn he can play that Elsa, she can come down and banish one of these Lilos, but then she gets sent straight back to the hand.
Did the stream end?
I think we may have just lost the stream. We'll work on getting it back, so just give us one moment. Sorry about that. And we are back, and Frank Austin took the first game. I think the situation we were in when we lost the stream was a very commanding one from Frank Austin. Those Lilos combined with that Chromacon just put too much pressure into Bryant and could not answer all of the threats Frank was establishing on the board. And it looks like both players choosing to alter 5 cards, keeping 2 cards in their hands. Very good. And do you see how Frank is shuffling his deck? A very effective way of shuffling, but it hurts my heart knowing those poor cards getting all bent there.
Yes. Part of me is hoping, please don't have any enchanted in there. Right, but yeah, very, very interesting matchup. If you were Brian, what are you thinking right now? Are you trying to, ink as much as possible to get to that Raging Storm, do that board wipe? Like, what is the strategy here?
I think really probably Brian's best shot in this matchup is hoping Frank doesn't draw into that Chromacon. But aside from that, I think having out those characters like the Rafikis, like the Palace Guards that are able to challenge Frank's characters early on, and then hopefully just stall the law enough to get to that later game, and then if Bryant is running the Raging Storm, then using that to clear the board and reset the game state. But Frank has got to be aware that that's a possibility. Will likely hold on to his Mowglis, so it is something that Bryant also needs to be aware of. But I think, having access to the Grandmother Willow on Brian's side, probably playing a 1-cost character, playing the Grandmother Willow, and then being able to get out something like your Genie a turn sooner, being able to get out your Cheshire Cat sooner as well, and as well as some other 1-cost characters, just kind of helps fight for the board against Frank, who's also going to be playing a lot of characters early on.
Right, and we see Brian play the Elanwi on turn 1, which I'm sure is beneficial to be able to give support to his other characters and be more effective at being able to remove characters, because sometimes when Frank is playing those characters that have 3 or more willpower, it can be difficult.
Yeah, you've got to wonder though whether the Elanwi is what Bryant wants to play in this situation. I think in this deck, really there is something to increase the strength of a character to then put them in range of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which is one of the removal options this deck has. The fact she only has 1 willpower does mean that if she challenges into something, she's going to be banished in most cases. So probably would have preferred the Rafiki or Palace Guard in that instance, but we play the cards we're dealt, and Frank thinking about what they're going to ink this turn. And it's going to be Rhino into the ink, and then a Lady played down on Frank's side, and then we pass back over to Bryant.
And we are just on the edge of our seats here, just waiting to see what is going to be played on turn 2.
Okay, so we didn't miss any of the action. Straight back over to Bryant.
We see Bagheera here. That is a card I haven't seen too much lately in Winterspell meta.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's a 3-cost vanilla with 4 strength, 4 willpower, questing for 1. But in these decks, just to give them a little bit of early control options, the 4 strength being particularly relevant to take out things like Daisy Ducks, could take out Palace Guards. So yeah, it is a very functional card. Nothing flashy about Bagheera, but does a lot of work in a matchup like this. So Frank looks like he's going to ink the Ursula once again. Not particularly useful in this matchup. And are they able to follow up with the Grandmother Willow? And actually, it's going to be a Mowgli.
However, Mowgli is just not going to snipe anything. However, this isn't always the worst play because it's always great to get information on what your opponent may have in their hand.
Yeah, I agree, and especially a player of Frank's caliber, I'm sure that information is going to be incredibly relevant as they navigate these future turns. So, even though we didn't get a card removed in that case, we did get a lot of information that we can use for our future turns here. So Bryant tapping his Grandmother Willow, probably indicating we're going to use that strength, that cost reduction ability, to play out a character. But which character will it be? Another Grandmother Willow. Okay.
We're building a forest over here, Charlie.
Amazing. And yeah, that's one of the advantages of Grandmother Willow in a deck like this over something like the Lantern that used to be run, because Grandmother Willows discount Grandmother Willows.
Right. And sometimes it's just better to prioritize playing a character over an item.
Yep, absolutely. If you need to challenge into things, then even a little Grandmother Willow can sometimes do the job, especially when paired with that Eilonwy. So Frank probably not having the ideal start. Oftentimes it's really, you want to get out the Grandmother Willow on your side just to be able to start reducing the cost of things like your tramp, but Frank is going to look to navigate this here. We play the Bobby to start filtering through our deck.
Right. I feel like we have seen so many cheese towers, so many Bobbies and Maruskis, Spray Cheese Kid. But it's just such a good card, being able to filter through your deck, trying to search for answers you may need later on in the game.
Who'd have thought this one cost character from Whispers in the Well would be one of the most played cards in all of Disney Lorcana, but you love to see it. And thematically is also a dog, so fits perfectly into the dog's deck. Yeah, it's interesting. Now that Bryant has those two Grandmother Willows up, does discount the Elsa. Elsa coming down for 3 is a lot better than what we saw in game number 1, where Elsa was coming down for 5 each time.
Right, and I'm sure Bryant is thinking, I need to clear Frank's board before he plays Chromacon again.
Let's get it done before that thing comes down and starts causing a headache. And there we go. We see the power of Eilonwy doing the same function as Basil in the Blurple matchups, being able to quest, buffing up the strength of Elsa, and then taking out the lady. So it does give Frank an opportunity to be able to then banish the Eilonwy on the following turn, but of course then they're trading away one of their characters, which they often will not want to be doing. So we do have Tramp in hand. That's important.
Yeah, I wonder if not being able to play a Grandmother Willow has just kind of hurt the tempo over on Frank's side.
Yeah, and you see that that a lot now. It's become such an important card in the kind of the optimal play line for this deck. And when we don't see the Grandmother Willow, dogs almost look slow. But we do play out the Tramp. It's going to let us look for some cards deeper. And that does look like an Emerald Chromacon to me. So we'll see if Frank holds on to that. I suspect we might take a turn off here, then play the Chromacon on the following turn, and then we can start questing. Frank really deliberating. It's one of those decisions can just have a complete knock-on effect for the rest of this game, so definitely wants to do it correctly.
To the best of his ability. Right, and then passing the turn back to Bryant here, coming out his ink, doing the math, because I'm sure Grandmother Willow, you got a -2 on what character you're going to play next, but it looks like instead we are going to first play Junior Woodchuck guidebook and instantly exert and banish to draw 2.
Yeah, not the ideal player. Imagine if Bryant was able to maybe have played a Demona in that place instead with the discount from the Grandmother Willow. Basically, exert everything on Frank's side of the board, clear everything up on the next turn. Would have probably locked Frank out of the game, but instead having to take a turn off almost by playing that Woodchuck guidebook. But we do get to play the Genie with the discount there from the Grandmother Willows. And very quickly heading over to Frank's side of the board now. So is going to be able to play the Emerald Chromacon this turn, but it may just be a little bit too little too late because Brian has actually established a very, very wide board that is going to be questing for a lot more than the board Frank has set up.
Right. I feel like this is almost just the opposite of what we saw in game 1, where Frank had this wide board that Brian was just like, what do I do? How can I fight this? And yeah, how the tables have turned.
Absolutely. And Under the Sea would have been fantastic in this spot because we would have been able to get rid of everything except the Cheshire Cat, but sadly it was not meant to be. I wonder if Frank is going to maybe set up some characters to be banished so that he can actually bounce something back, like the Bobby back to hand, to allow him to dig one card deeper into their deck. But also probably going to leave up enough characters there to be able to sing Under the Sea if necessary next turn. You can see Frank kind of shaking his head there, maybe not even sure if that was the play to make.
Right, and then passing the turn back to Brian here. And Brian's in a position, now that Chromacon is out, it does keep him check of, do I challenge or do I try to be the aggressor here and questing out? And we are choosing to challenge with the Elsa, taking out the Mowgli, and Frank now deciding, what should I bounce back to hand?
And grabbing hold of the Tramp, is that what we're going to go for? Yes, so Frank actually using the Emerald Chromacon there to bounce back his own Tramp, which is something we see a lot. It's often better once you have a much wider board because we're not going to get much of a discount to replay that Tramp. And then in Iago as well. So Iago is an illusion, evasive 4/6, so can be banished by an item. I think we did see a Della's Moon Lullaby in Frank's hand, which could be used to get rid of that Iago, but it looks like this game is very quickly spiraling out of control for Frank.
Right, and Brian just going on a quest with everything that he can, jumping ahead in lore.
Frank counting up
Frank
all
here's
of the
doing
law.
the math.
Frank,
right, you have to.
Absolutely, Frank doing what he's known for, the maths. But I think you would need a miracle out of those 3 cards from Tramp. I'm not sure if it's going to be happening this game, but that will mean we'll go to game number 3. But let's see. Sorry, I'm counting out Frank, but if anyone can turn it around, it's a 2-time DLC winner.
Right, it's not over until it's over.
So going to get rid of the Ilonwi there. So we're now down to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 law. So that Frank only needs to remove 1 law from the board to keep them in this game, which they've done. And now does Brian have an answer? I think if Brian's able to banish even one of Frank's characters, maybe with an Elsa, it would be a good position to be in. But I think we may just end up going for a big old quest here up to 19 and then hoping beyond hope that Frank doesn't have some way to remove our entire board with something like Under the Sea.
Right, and Brian here counting it out, making sure how much lore can I possibly quest for, and making those decisions.
But 2 very interesting games, 2 very different games as well.
Yeah, 2 very, very different games that have shifted just in opposite directions here. And playing a Demona.
Okay, and Frank actually does have Under the Sea in hand. And I was going to say Frank didn't exert their characters. I'm not even sure if Bryant Yeah, Brian just saying, you know what? I'm so close to winning. You have to get rid of a lot of my characters now to be able to stay in this game. Frank does have Under the Sea, does have Rhino, but no ways to draw cards, so we absolutely aren't going to be able to deal with the Demona, the two Cheshire Cats, and the Iago. And Brian just needs one character to stick to the board to take this game.
Probably a pretty intense game, and Frank just trying to play to all their outs, trying to figure out, okay, anything I can do in this situation to get rid of everything.
Yeah. But yep, there we go. We're going to scoop it up. Might as well see the writing on the wall, and then we get 30 minutes to finish game number 3 of round 9.
I know, just like these Illumineers, we may not be playing Disney Lorcana, but casting can take a whole lot out of you.
Yeah, I just checked the stream. We've been online now for 11 and a half hours.
Right, and especially you, Charlie, since your production, which thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, my
You have been
pleasure.
up extra early, making sure that we're ready to put on a good show here.
We certainly tried our best. There've been some teething issues along the way, but ultimately I've just had a really lovely day hanging out with some awesome people. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's joined us for this stream throughout the day as well.
Yeah, huge shout out to our other two casters, Melissa and Nora, who will be joining us once again tomorrow morning my time zone, but day 2 of Disney Lorcana Sao Paulo.
Yeah, and I would say it's been actually a really, really wonderful event. Like, of course, a lot of the content has been in Portuguese, but there's been very little downtime on the Brazilian side. They've had loads of content, lots of interactive things happening. So, great job to them. Their first DLC, they do have one more coming up, and then there's also going to be a Continentals or a Regionals, I should say, for Brazil. And it's just a community that is always incredibly passionate, whether it's TCGs, whether it's video games, then often known as some of the best in the world, some of the most competitive in the world. So giving them this showcase to be able to show off, and of course welcoming in a lot of overseas Lorcana players as well.
Yeah,
So
any plans, Charlie, to travel to any of the DLCs in Brazil?
I was actually planning to go to this DLC, but then in the end I couldn't make it. Sadly, just life happens. So I would have loved to have been there in person, but getting to enjoy it vicariously through Matthias and also getting to watch the stream. But maybe for one of the future ones, who knows? I'd love to visit. There's yeah, as I said, huge community down there, and it's always a good excuse to see my in-laws as well.
Love that.
But yeah, certainly hoping we see more DLCs in Central America and South America, because again, just such a passionate community, people who are really, really engaged with Disney Lorcana. So being able to have an event that they're able to attend is just so, so wonderful.
Yeah, it's always amazing and so exciting to be able to see so many new regions joining the Disney Lorcana universe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this season, a lot was made of the fact that we got fewer DLCs in North America, we got fewer DLCs in Europe, but we have seen so many DLCs over in Asia. We're seeing DLCs in South America, in Australia as well. So it's great to see the global expanse of Disney Lorcana, showing that it really is a universal TCG.
Right, and it looks like we have completed altering our hands, and Frank Carson is going to kick us off here by inking. What are we inking?
Thinking about inking the Enterprising Dog, and does ink the Enterprising Dog to play a lady. And we see the Emerald Chromacon in Frank's hand in game 1. That made all of the difference, made it so, so difficult for Brian to really establish themselves on the board. And you've got to bet Frank is very happy to see that early on, and even more happy to see Brian not play a 1-cost character.
Right, I'm sure Brian is just a bit devastated right now to not see a 1-cost character, because that can just be so hard to catch up from. It's already difficult to catch up at times being on the draw, but not seeing anything to play on turn 1 can just be a huge uphill battle from here.
Yeah, because Frank is all but guaranteed at least 1 lore here with the lady, and if, not able to find a tramp, but if they were able to find a tramp, then lady would quest for 2 lore. But one law is good enough in this position. And looking at Brian's hand, I see a Grandmother Willow there, but I'm not sure they're going to have anything else they can play alongside her on turn 2. So Frank may very well be able to get another quest in there with those 3 characters safely, and will also be able to set up the Emerald Chromacon on the next turn if they so wish.
I know, definitely seeing 2 Lady Elegant Spaniels over on Frank's side, and the Grandmother
Ooh,
Willow is just giving Frank the opportunity to go all gas, no brakes.
yeah.
However, Bryant playing the Mowgli, removing the Emerald Chromacon, may have slowed down Frank's plan a little.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent heads up play there from Brian. They realized how much of a backbreaking card that Emerald Chromacon can truly be. So almost getting ahead of it there with the Mowgli. So great choice there. And you can see, I think Frank wasn't even expecting that. Potentially is looking.
Yeah, we just saw the hand motion there,
Yeah.
being like, "What was this?"
It was either that or he was swatting away a mosquito. But Nani, a very, very good card in this spot as well, will hopefully allow you to find one of those important characters. Lilo, a great character. There's not really anything that Amethyst Amber can do to stop that coming back turn after turn, except for maybe Hades looking for a deal. So may as well grab that, and it's going to be able to put on that consistent law pressure.
Right, and truly, Frank is putting on the pressure here, safely questing for an additional 3 lore.
Yeah, so choosing not to ink. I think the inkable cards we have in hand look like the Tramp Street Smart Dog, as well as the Lilo Escape Artist cards that you really do not want to send to your Inkwell. And Dogs is a deck that can function on a surprisingly small amount of ink, especially now with the Grandmother Willow as well. So I think, again, a very heads-up play by Frank there. And there's Bagheera. Once more,
Yeah,
just
a card we brought up last game that we don't see too often, but as you said, Charlie, the stats are pretty good, nothing too flashy, but very good in instances in this matchup where you want to challenge and remove those characters.
Yeah, sometimes you just want that big body that can threaten some of Frank's characters. One of the big advantages of a card like Nani is the 3/3 means she can often survive a challenge, or at least will take down whatever challenges into her. When you have Bagheera who's a 4/4, then Nani is going to survive. So Frank really thinking about this. It looks like we're going to play a Grandmother Willow discounted with the other Grandmother Willow, and now is going to allow us to play our Tramp Street Smart Dog. We know the 2 cards in Frank's hand are Lilos, so those are going to be very easy discards, and then we get to look at 5 other cards as well, so it will really help us sculpt our hand and plan for those future turns.
Right, now, if you were Frank, are you looking for another Emerald Chromacon, or are you looking for Under the Sea? What are you truly prioritizing right now?
I think potentially the Emerald Chromacon, just because I think it's the better tempo play in this match. Yes, Brian does have a lot of characters with the two strength who would go Under the Sea, but I think we just saw the power in game number 1 of the Emerald Chromacon, so that's probably going to be what you grab. But I didn't actually get the chance to see what Frank was able to pick up.
Yeah. Right, and we see Frank questing, however, thinking about what should I quest, but because that Bagheera there does keep Frank in check, because as we said, they're a pretty big body, pretty good stats, and can remove that Nani.
Yeah, and the interesting thing right now is because we were able to play the Tramp Street Smart Dog, now both of our ladies Elegant Spaniel are questing for 2, which is just a huge law pressure as well, and it kind of puts Bryant in a bit of a difficult position. Normally you would imagine would want to get rid of the Nanny just because of the singing capabilities, but maybe is going to be forced to take out one of the ladies to slow down the law race there a little bit. And now we can use Nanny potentially to get rid of that Bagheera, taking a threat from Bryant's side of the board. So playing one of the Lilos there from the discard for free. And indeed, we did grab the Emerald Chromacon using the Tramp Street Smart Dog. I think Brian not giving much away with their facial expressions, but I'm sure inside was just letting out a scream into the abyss.
I'm sure. I feel especially with playing the Dumbo, I'm just not sure if that was the strongest play he could do, but seeing his cards, I'm sure that's the strongest play he could do for that turn, but I just don't think it's the strongest play for this matchup.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You need something that can contest the board a little bit better. And now Frank is representing 5, 6, 7, 8 law on board. Brian can only take out one character with the Dumbo, and it then will be bounced back to the hand with the Emerald Chromacon. So it's now really the ball is very much in Frank's court. And yes, they do have Gim on board.
Right, and Brian really here counting it all out, seeing, is this really it, or do I have any potential outs?
Yeah, I was gonna say we need to get 3 law off the board. Brian looking at the hand, seeing that they just